Okay. Is mindfulness on the breath a beginner's practice? Isn't the goal to be mindful of everything, not just the breath? Well, it depends what you mean by mindfulness on the breath. Mindfulness of the breath, I guess. I'm not sure if I said it. I did answer another question, I think last week, on I think something of the sort. Why we focus on the abdomen, that's what it was, right? So I did talk about it, that the breath is a concept. So it's not a matter of being a beginner's practice. It's a matter of being a conceptual practice, a practice that only has the potential ability to calm the mind. And it doesn't by itself have the ability to clear the mind, to allow one to see clearly, because it's not focused on nama-rupa, which relates to the question I just answered. If you're not focusing on nama-rupa, you'll never get rid of this idea of self, the ego. There are many meditative contemplatives out there who believe in a self, who believe in God, who believe in the soul and so on, and have this view because they haven't seen nama-rupa, and they haven't come to have this profound realization that it doesn't matter what you talk about. If you talk about God or a soul or a self, what you're really talking about is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and thinking, which are all nothing more than nama-rupa, rupa and nama. So, it's mindfulness specifically or strictly about the breath is a samatha practice, or a practice which only has the potential to calm the mind. Now, that doesn't mean that what we generally call mindfulness of the breath can't be used to see clearly. But if it's the breath, specifically the breath that you're focusing on, then it is. It's and for many people this is the case. They focus on it and their mind becomes calm. That calm can be useful. It can be used to develop insight, but it doesn't have to be. And many people don't develop subsequently insight, and they're content with the calm, and they think they're enlightened, or so on and so on. But if you focus on the physical experience of the breath, and this is why we focus on the stomach, right? Rising, falling, because that's the breath. Anyone who says that's not mindfulness of the breath is really being dogmatic, right? And this is what I was saying about the nose, right, last week. The stomach is equally mindfulness of breathing. If the texts say focus on the nose or focus on the stomach, it's not really clear. But it's clear. What's clear in the text, and what I didn't mention, promised I was going to say last week, was where in the texts they talk about mindfulness of the rising and the falling of the abdomen, and it's in one sutta at least, but I have to look it up where else it is. It's in the Sammaditthi Sutta, I believe, if I'm not wrong, where Sariputta talks about the winds in the body, and it's something that the Buddha has talked about. And the wind in the body, the wind element, and it's the rising and falling, the winds in the stomach. This is the part of the wind element, and so it's a part of our physical experience. And by wind means the pressure. So the pressure that comes in the stomach. It's specifically mentioned in the Sammaditthi Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, I believe. I'm not a scholar by any means. But okay, so if you're focusing on that aspect of the breath, the physical experience that relates to the breath, then it certainly is vipassana, it is insight meditation, and it's not a beginner's practice. Because one thing we have to realize in meditation is that we're really not going anywhere. We're not trying to get somewhere. The path is like this imploding path. The Eightfold Noble Path doesn't take you somewhere. You're not going out there. You're coming back inside until the mind doesn't go anywhere. Some people call it the inward path. There's the Buddhist publishing group in Malaysia called the Inward Path, which is a really good name, because that's where this path is leading. So there's really no such thing as a beginner's practice. Anything that is useful in the beginning, if it's really truly useful, it's going to lead you all the way. And from the very beginning, the practice that you start with has the potential to take you all the way to the end, because as long as it's focusing on nama and rupa, it's going to take you, or it has the potential to take you all the way to the end. That's one way of answering. But in practical terms, the problem with focusing on the stomach is not that it's not going to bring about insight and realization of the truth. The problem is that it's not enough. And well, the idea of avoiding other things it's a good point, but it's not really the most important point. The most important point is that the mind is more active than that, and the mind will fail to, at least in the beginning, will fail to fully grasp the reality of what it's experiencing. And because the mind is distracted, and because the mind is running all over the place, especially in the beginning, that you have to give it some other objects to pay attention to. And yeah, so I mean, in that sense, really, it's true, and we never recommend for anyone to focus simply on the abdomen. If you're talking about someone, if you're questioning about someone who practices anapanasati, then generally they're practicing anapanasati for the purpose of gaining calm. And they have different theories on this as well, but mostly their idea is that they're going to gain calm first. And if you're going to gain calm, then yeah, you do lose the rest. You're trying to avoid them, and you're trying to ignore them, because you're trying to enter into a trance state, or a state of, maybe not exact, maybe trance is a pejorative word, but it sort of is a trance. I mean, you're trying to get your mind into a new level of experience, a conditioned level of experience, and that blocks out quite a bit. It cuts off quite a bit of the spectrum of experience. On the other hand, if you read the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the four foundations of mindfulness, it seems like the idea is to do the opposite. That if you feel angry or upset, then you know that you're angry or upset, and therefore you do incorporate everything into your practice. That's the practice that I teach. I would never, as I said, we don't tell people to focus simply on the stomach. We use that as, well, yeah, as you said, a beginner's practice. But so what I was saying by it's not a beginner's practice is that it has the potential to take you all the way. But maybe better than a beginner's practice is it's an example practice. It's just one of an infinite number of practices that you could undertake. Once you learn how to do that, then we start telling you, well, actually in the beginning we'll tell you about the feelings, about the mind, about the dhammas. There are 4 satipatthanas, no? Kaya, Vedana, Citta, Dhamma. If you've read my booklet on how to meditate, you will see that I think I explained that quite clearly, that actually the abdomen is just an example. But why I stressed in the beginning, because what was on my mind was the power of this, the rising and the falling, and I think a lot of people miss that. How incredible it can be to simply say to yourself, rising and falling, and the profound insight that can come from it. Why I denied that it's a beginner's practice is because I don't want you to think that just because it's the first thing that we give you, and then later we give you other practices, that it was only the first thing, or it was only the first step. Simply watching the rising and the falling can lead you to enlightenment, and it certainly leads everyone who practices it to change the way they look at reality. And that's often the problem, because there's one video I did that I was really happy about, because it's one that really needs to be done and needs to be said. It's in regards to this. It's what was it called? Experience of Reality or something. I titled it some silly name. But it was basically, what is the meditation? And all of those bad experiences that we have that are actually right practice. And it was basically, I hope in that video, or I think in that video, I talked about how the rising and the falling is a good example, because it becomes stressful and it becomes unpleasant and we can't control it, and we try to control it, and therefore we think this meditation is bad and terrible and wrong for us. Maybe we're just not good at it. I love how my students from Thailand would always tell me, I'm just not suited to the rising and falling, or I just don't find it suitable. Mai tanat. They use this word mai tanat, which means I'm just not into it, basically. Which is always funny, because it means that they're not having fun with it. It's much more fun to count in one, out one, in two. I mean, it's much more peaceful, much more dependable, because you know that after one comes two, and then three, and then four. It's quite reassuring, actually. But when you go rising, falling, you don't know what's going to come next. And so it forces you to let go. That's all I wanted to say, but it is the first thing we give, and there's a lot more that you can focus on. And in the end, you should really be focusing on everything. But don't discard the rising and falling. Always come back to it. It's a wonderful, fairly unique object, I suppose. It's always there, and it's always there to teach you something. And the layers of things that it can teach you is quite incredible.